Welcome to my channel. What if the biggest problem in your life is not the situation around you, but the noise inside your own mind? What if the reason you feel tired even after resting, distracted even when you have important goals, afraid even when there is no real danger, and stressed even when everything appears normal is because your mind has forgotten how to be still? Imagine discovering a power that costs nothing, requires no expensive equipment, and can be practiced almost anywhere, yet could help you become calmer, more focused, more disciplined, and stronger from within. Imagine sitting quietly for a few minutes each day and slowly learning something most people spend their entire lives trying to find: control over their own attention. This is the hidden power of meditation. And before you decide that meditation is only for monks, spiritual people, or those with too much free time, stay with this story, because one ordinary young man named Daniel was about to discover that the greatest battle of his life was not happening outside him. It was happening inside his own mind. Daniel lived in a busy city where every day seemed to move faster than the one before it. His mornings began with an alarm, followed by messages, notifications, news, and endless scrolling. Before his feet touched the floor, his mind was already thinking about work. During breakfast, he worried about deadlines. While traveling, he checked his phone repeatedly. At work, he tried to concentrate, but every few minutes something interrupted his attention. By evening, his body was exhausted, yet his mind refused to rest. He would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations from the day, worrying about tomorrow, remembering mistakes from yesterday, and imagining problems that had not even happened. Daniel often wondered why he felt so tired when he had done nothing physically difficult. He eventually realized that his body was not the only thing that could become exhausted. His mind was tired too. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Daniel returned home and threw his phone onto the sofa. He had spent the entire afternoon trying to complete one important task, but his attention had been stolen by dozens of small distractions. He felt frustrated with himself. He wanted to learn new skills, improve his English, become more disciplined, and build a better future. But he could not stay focused long enough to make meaningful progress. He opened his laptop to study, but within minutes he was checking social media. He tried again, but another notification appeared. Soon an hour disappeared. Daniel closed the laptop and whispered, "Why can't I control my own mind?" That question stayed with him. The next morning, while walking through a quiet park, Daniel noticed an elderly man sitting alone beneath a large tree. The man was not using a phone, reading a book, or speaking to anyone. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was slow. Daniel had seen people meditate before, but he had always assumed it was something unnecessary. This time, however, something about the man's peaceful expression caught his attention. After a few minutes, the man opened his eyes and smiled. Daniel gathered enough courage to ask, "What are you doing?" The man replied, "I am practicing being where I am." Daniel looked confused. The man continued, "Most people spend their mornings living in yesterday, their afternoons worrying about tomorrow, and their evenings regretting what they did today. They are physically present, but their minds are somewhere else." Those words struck Daniel deeply because he recognized himself in every sentence. He asked, "Is that meditation?" The old man nodded. "Meditation is not about escaping life. It is about learning how to experience life without being controlled by every thought that passes through your mind." Daniel sat beside him and listened. The man explained that meditation was not magic and did not mean forcing the mind to become completely empty. Thoughts would always come, worries would appear, memories would return. The goal was not to fight them, but to notice them without immediately following them. "Imagine your mind is like the sky," the man said. "Thoughts are clouds. Some are dark, some are bright, and some disappear quickly. But the sky does not chase the clouds. It simply allows them to pass." Daniel had never considered his thoughts this way. He had always believed every thought deserved his attention. If his mind said, "You might fail," he believed it. If it said, "People may judge you," he obeyed it. If it reminded him of an embarrassing moment, he replayed it again and again. Now he wondered what would happen if he could simply notice a thought without becoming trapped inside it. The old man encouraged him to begin with something incredibly simple. Sit quietly for 5 minutes each morning, he said. Close your eyes if you are comfortable, breathe naturally, feel the air entering and leaving your body. When your mind wanders, notice it. Then gently return your attention to your breathing. Daniel laughed nervously. Only 5 minutes? The man smiled. 5 minutes practiced consistently can teach you more about yourself than an hour practiced once. The next morning, Daniel decided to try. He woke before sunrise, placed his phone across the room, and sat on a chair near the window. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. For approximately 3 seconds, everything felt peaceful. Then, his mind exploded with thoughts. He remembered an unfinished email. He thought about money. He worried about his career. He remembered something embarrassing he had said years ago. He wondered what he would eat for breakfast. He thought about checking his phone. After less than a minute, he opened his eyes in frustration. I can't do this, he said. But then he remembered the old man's words. The goal was not to have no thoughts. The goal was to notice them and return. So, Daniel closed his eyes again. A thought appeared. He noticed it. He returned to his breath. Another thought came. He noticed it. He returned again. He began to understand that this simple act was actually a form of mental training. Every time his attention wandered and he brought it back, he was practicing control. The experience was difficult, but something unexpected happened. After 5 minutes, Daniel opened his eyes and felt slightly different. His problems had not disappeared. His responsibilities were still waiting. His future was still uncertain. Yet his mind felt a little less crowded. He had discovered something powerful. Peace did not require life to become perfect. Sometimes peace begins when you stop allowing every thought to control you. From that morning onward, Daniel continued practicing. Some days were easy. Some days were frustrating. Sometimes 5 minutes felt like an hour. Other times, he wished he could sit longer. He began noticing how often his mind escaped the present moment. While eating, he worried about work. While working, he worried about the future. While resting, he remembered the past. Meditation slowly taught him to return to the moment in front of him. When he drank coffee, he noticed its warmth. When he walked, he noticed his footsteps. When someone spoke, he tried to listen instead of preparing his next response. These changes were small, almost invisible, but they began changing the way Daniel experienced his life. He realized that his mind had been running for years without rest, constantly jumping from one thought to another. Meditation was teaching him that he could pause, he could breathe, he could observe, he could choose, and that ability would soon become more valuable than he could possibly imagine, because the next challenge in Daniel's life would force him to discover whether the calm he was practicing in silence could survive when the world around him became anything but calm. The following weeks tested Daniel's new practice in ways he had not expected. His workload suddenly increased, his manager became impatient, and several important projects began falling behind schedule. The old Daniel would have immediately felt overwhelmed. He would have opened his laptop with 10 thoughts racing through his head, answered messages without thinking, and spent the entire day moving from one task to another without truly completing anything. But now, something inside him had changed. The moment he felt pressure rising, he remembered the quiet mornings beneath the tree and the simple instruction he had learned. Pause, breathe, observe, return. One afternoon, Daniel received an email that made his stomach tighten. A major client had complained about a mistake in a report he had prepared. His manager forwarded the message and asked him to explain what had happened. Daniel's first reaction was panic. His mind immediately began creating a story. This is terrible. They will think I am incompetent. I might lose my job. Everyone will blame me. He felt his heart beating faster. His hands became tense. Normally, he would have replied immediately, defending himself before understanding the situation. But this time, he stopped. He placed both feet on the floor and took a slow breath. Then another. He noticed the fear inside him without immediately obeying it. He asked himself a simple question: what is actually happening right now? The answer was surprisingly different from the story in his head. A mistake had been discovered. That was all. He had not lost his job. Nobody had announced that he was a failure. There was a problem, and problems could be solved. Daniel opened the report, found the error, and realized that part of the mistake was his responsibility. Instead of hiding it, he admitted it. He explained what had happened, corrected the information, and created a system to prevent the same mistake in the future. His manager was disappointed, but the situation ended without the disaster Daniel had imagined. That evening, Daniel understood something important about meditation. It had not removed the problem, it had changed the space between the problem and his response. Before meditation, his thoughts controlled his emotions, and his emotions controlled his actions. Now, there was a small pause. That pause gave him a choice. He could panic, or he could think. He could defend himself, or he could learn. He could blame someone, or he could take responsibility. That small pause was becoming one of the greatest powers in his life. Daniel began noticing this pattern everywhere. When someone spoke rudely to him, he did not immediately return the anger. When traffic became frustrating, he noticed his irritation and returned to his breathing. When someone criticized his English pronunciation, he reminded himself that mistakes were part of learning. When he felt the urge to quit a difficult task, he paused and asked whether he was truly tired or simply uncomfortable. Meditation was teaching him to separate feelings from decisions. He discovered that emotions were real, but they did not always tell the truth. Fear could say, "You cannot do this," even when he had the ability to learn. Anger could say something hurtful, even when silence would protect his peace. Anxiety could say, "Everything will go wrong," even when there was no evidence. The mind could produce a thought without making that thought a fact. This realization gave Daniel a new kind of freedom. He began to understand awareness. Awareness meant seeing what was happening inside him before automatically reacting to it. If he felt nervous, he could say, "I notice nervousness." If he felt angry, he could say, "I notice anger." If he felt afraid, he could say, "I notice fear." The words seemed simple, but they created distance. He was no longer saying, "I am fear." He was saying, "I am experiencing fear." That difference changed everything. One morning, Daniel decided to test his new awareness during his English practice. Speaking English had always made him nervous. He knew many words, but whenever he tried to speak with another person, his mind became crowded with questions. Was his grammar correct? Was his pronunciation strange? Would the other person laugh? Would they think he was unintelligent? Because of these thoughts, he often remained silent even when he knew what he wanted to say. That morning, he stood in front of a mirror and began speaking. His voice was uncertain. He made mistakes. He forgot words. He stopped several times. The old Daniel would have immediately criticized himself. But instead, he took a breath and continued. "I am learning," he said aloud. "I don't need to be perfect." He repeated the sentence and started again. Something changed. He realized that his biggest obstacle was not his English. It was his fear of making mistakes. Meditation had helped him understand that fear could exist without controlling him. So he began practicing English with the same method he used during meditation. He focused on one sentence. His mind wandered toward fear. He noticed it. Then he returned to speaking. He made a mistake. He noticed embarrassment. Then he returned to speaking. He forgot a word. He paused, found another word, and continued. Slowly, speaking became easier. Daniel realized that meditation and learning were connected. Both required attention, both required patience, both required accepting mistakes without giving up. Both required returning after distraction. The more he practiced meditation, the more comfortable he became with the process of learning. He stopped demanding immediate perfection from himself. This was a major turning point. For years, Daniel had believed that successful people were naturally confident, naturally disciplined, and naturally focused. Now he understood that these qualities could be trained. Focus was not something you either had or did not have. It was something you practiced. Discipline was not a personality trait reserved for special people. It was the result of repeatedly doing what mattered, even when motivation disappeared. Confidence was not the absence of fear. It was the ability to act while fear was present. Meditation was teaching Daniel all three lessons at once. Every morning he sat down. Every morning his mind wandered. Every morning he returned. That repetition was slowly strengthening his ability to focus. Then he began applying the same principle to his work. Instead of trying to complete 5 tasks simultaneously, he chose one. He turned off unnecessary notifications. He placed his phone away from his desk. He worked for 25 minutes without checking anything else, then took a short break. At first, it was difficult. His hand automatically reached for his phone. His mind wanted stimulation. But he noticed the urge and returned to his task. Over time, his concentration improved. He began completing work faster, not because he was working harder, but because he was wasting less attention. This discovery surprised him. He had spent years searching for better productivity methods, yet the most useful lesson was simply learning to control where his attention went. Daniel began protecting his attention like something valuable. He realized that every day, companies, advertisements, social media platforms, and endless notifications were competing for his mind. If he did not consciously choose where to place his attention, someone else would choose for him. Meditation helped him reclaim that choice. He began asking himself, where is my attention right now? Sometimes the answer was uncomfortable. He would notice that he was scrolling without purpose, comparing his life with strangers, or worrying about situations he could not control. Instead of judging himself, he simply returned. He returned to work. He returned to conversation. He returned to learning. He returned to the present moment. This habit slowly changed his relationship with technology. His phone was still useful, but it no longer controlled his every moment. He began leaving it behind during meals. He stopped checking it immediately after waking. Before sleeping, he gave himself a period of silence. At first, the quiet felt strange. Then it became peaceful. Daniel discovered that silence could feel uncomfortable when you were not used to hearing your own thoughts. But if you stayed with that discomfort, something interesting happened. The noise slowly became clearer. Beneath the endless thoughts were deeper feelings he had ignored for years. He realized he was not only stressed about work, he was afraid of wasting his life. He was worried that he was not progressing quickly enough. He compared himself with people who seemed more successful. He feared disappointing his family. He wanted to become better, but secretly believed he was behind everyone else. Meditation gave him enough quiet to finally recognize these fears. And once he recognized them, he could begin addressing them. He understood that many of his problems were not created by reality, but by comparison. He was measuring his life against people he barely knew, seeing only their achievements while hiding his own struggles. Meditation taught him to return to his own path. His journey did not need to look like anyone else's. He could improve slowly. He could learn at his own pace. He could make mistakes and continue. He could become stronger without becoming someone else. This realization gave him peace. But Daniel soon discovered that meditation was not only helping him during peaceful moments, it was preparing him for something far more difficult. A few months later, a sudden event would shake his personal life, challenge his patience, and force him to confront the deepest fear he had been avoiding. This time, there would be no quiet office, no simple solution, and no guarantee that everything would be okay. Daniel would have to discover whether the calm he had practiced every morning could remain alive when his world suddenly began to fall apart. The difficult moment arrived on an ordinary Thursday evening. Daniel had just finished his meditation when his phone rang. It was his younger sister, calling with news that immediately changed the atmosphere of the room. Their father had suddenly become seriously ill and had been taken to the hospital. Daniel felt his entire body become cold. The calm he had practiced seemed to disappear in an instant. His breathing became fast. His thoughts raced. Questions appeared one after another. What would happen? Would his father recover? What if something went wrong? What if this was the beginning of the worst day of his life? Daniel wanted to run from the uncertainty, but there was nowhere to run. For the first time, he understood that meditation was never supposed to make life painless. It was supposed to teach him how to remain present when pain arrived. He closed his eyes for a moment and took one breath, then another. The fear was still there. The uncertainty was still there. But he remembered what he had practiced for months. Notice, breathe, return. He did not try to force himself to feel positive. He did not pretend everything would definitely be fine. He simply accepted the truth of that moment. He was afraid, and he did not know what would happen next. That acceptance gave him enough stability to act. He called his sister. He arranged transportation. He contacted relatives. He packed a small bag and went to the hospital. During the journey, his mind repeatedly tried to imagine the future. Each time, he returned to the present. Right now, he was traveling. Right now, he could breathe. Right now, he could be available for his family. He could not control tomorrow, but he could control how he showed up today. At the hospital, Daniel found his sister sitting alone in a waiting area. She was frightened and exhausted. Daniel sat beside her. In the past, he might have tried to fill the silence with useless advice. He might have said, "Don't worry, everything will be okay," even though he could not know that. Instead, he simply stayed beside her. He listened. When she cried, he did not tell her to stop. When she was silent, he did not force her to speak. He understood that sometimes the greatest gift you can give another person is your calm presence. Hours passed slowly. The doctors were working, but the family had no clear answers. Daniel noticed how easily fear could take over a room. Every time a door opened, everyone looked up. Every time a doctor walked past, people searched his face for clues. Daniel felt the same anxiety, but he tried not to let it control every moment. He breathed slowly. He noticed the fear. He returned to the present. This did not make him careless. It made him useful. Because he was not completely consumed by panic, he could support his sister, answer calls, and help his family make practical decisions. He discovered that inner peace was not selfish. It allowed him to become stronger for the people around him. Eventually, the doctor came with an update. His father was stable, but the next few days would be important. It was not the certainty Daniel wanted, but it was enough for the moment. He closed his eyes and felt tears forming. He was grateful, but he was also afraid. He realized that two emotions could exist together. You could feel gratitude and fear at the same time. You could be hopeful without pretending there was no danger. You could be strong without pretending you were not hurting. Meditation had taught him something deeper than relaxation. It had taught him how to make space for reality. Over the following days, Daniel spent hours at the hospital. His routine disappeared. He slept irregularly. He ate whenever he remembered. His meditation practice became shorter, sometimes only 2 minutes. But he continued. He discovered that meditation did not need to be perfect. Some days, he could barely sit still. His mind was filled with fear. Other days, he felt exhausted and simply focused on 3 slow breaths. He realized that consistency did not mean doing something perfectly every day. It meant returning whenever you could. This became one of the most important lessons of his life. Many people abandon good habits because they miss one day. They think, "I failed, so there is no point continuing." Daniel learned that missing a day was not failure. The real failure was believing you could never begin again. Every time he returned to his breath, he was practicing the same lesson he needed in life. Begin again. When his father finally began recovering, Daniel felt an enormous wave of relief. But the experience had changed him. He had seen how quickly life could become uncertain. He had understood that tomorrow was never guaranteed. He began looking at his daily life differently. Before, he had constantly chased the next thing, the next promotion, the next achievement, the next goal, the next opportunity. Now he realized that life was happening in the moments he had been ignoring. A conversation with his sister, a cup of tea with his father, a quiet walk home, the feeling of sunlight on his face, the sound of rain against a window. These ordinary moments were not interruptions to his life, they were his life. Meditation had taught him to notice them. When Daniel returned to work, his colleagues immediately noticed something different. He seemed calmer. He did not rush his words. He listened more carefully. When problems appeared, he did not immediately panic. One colleague asked him, "How do you stay so calm these days?" Daniel smiled. "I am not always calm," he said. "I have just learned not to believe every thought that appears in my mind." His colleague looked confused, so Daniel explained, "When something goes wrong, my mind immediately creates a story about how terrible everything will become. I used to believe that story. Now I notice it first. Then I ask myself what is actually happening and what I can do next." That simple approach had transformed his life. He was no longer fighting every thought. He was choosing which thoughts deserved his attention. This became especially important when Daniel faced criticism. One day, a senior colleague criticized his work during a meeting. The words were harsh, and several people were listening. Daniel felt embarrassment rising inside him. His first instinct was to defend himself, but then he remembered the pause. He breathed. He listened. After the meeting, he reviewed the criticism and realized that some of it was unfair, but some of it was useful. Instead of rejecting everything because he disliked the delivery, he took the useful part and improved his work. He also learned that meditation could help him become less personally attached to every opinion. Not everyone would understand him, not everyone would like him, not everyone would agree with him. That was okay. He did not need to win every conversation. He did not need to prove his worth every day. He could listen without surrendering his values. He could accept feedback without destroying his self-respect. He could disagree without becoming angry. This was emotional strength. As the months passed, Daniel became increasingly interested in the connection between meditation and the way people treat themselves. He noticed that many people spoke to themselves more harshly than they would ever speak to a friend. If a friend made a mistake, they might say, "It's okay, learn from it." But when they made the same mistake, they said, "You are useless. You always fail." Daniel recognized that he had been doing this for years. Meditation helped him hear that inner voice. Once he became aware of it, he began changing it. When he made mistakes, he practiced responding with patience. He did not make excuses, but he stopped attacking himself. He learned to say, "I made a mistake. I can learn from it. I can try again." This was not weakness. It was a healthier form of discipline. He understood that constant self-hatred did not create improvement. It created fear. And fear made people hide their mistakes instead of learning from them. Compassion, on the other hand, allowed people to admit mistakes and continue growing. Daniel began applying this lesson to his English learning as well. He stopped being embarrassed by his accent. He stopped expecting perfect grammar before speaking. He started recording his voice and listening to it without judgment. Sometimes he laughed at his mistakes, but he no longer felt ashamed. He treated every mistake as information. He noticed which words he struggled to pronounce and practiced them. He noticed which grammar patterns confused him and studied them. He spoke with friends even when his sentences were imperfect. Slowly, his confidence grew. He realized that meditation had not directly taught him English, but it had taught him something equally important: how to remain patient while learning. That patience allowed him to continue when progress felt slow. And consistency, he discovered, was more powerful than talent without discipline. One evening, Daniel returned to the park where he had first met the old man. He searched beneath the large tree, hoping to see him again. After waiting for several minutes, he finally noticed the familiar figure walking along the path. Daniel smiled and approached him. "I understand now," Daniel said. The old man smiled. "Understand what?" "You were right. Meditation does not remove problems." The man nodded. "No, it teaches you how to meet them." Daniel sat beside him and told him everything that had happened: his father's illness, his fear, his changing relationship with work, his English practice, his struggle with self-criticism. The old man listened quietly. Then he said, "You have learned something many people spend decades discovering. The mind is powerful, but it does not have to be your master." Daniel looked at the trees moving gently in the wind. "So what should I do now?" he asked. The old man smiled. "Continue returning." Daniel understood. There would always be another thought, another fear, another distraction, another difficult day. Meditation was not a finish line he would eventually cross. It was a practice of returning to the breath, returning to the present, returning to awareness, returning to the person he wanted to be. And just when Daniel thought he had finally understood the deepest lesson of meditation, the old man gave him one final challenge, one that would force him to look beyond his own peace and discover how the calmness he had built inside could become a source of strength for everyone around him. Daniel thought the old man was talking about meditation, but the challenge was much deeper. If meditation has helped you find peace, the old man said, do not keep that peace locked inside yourself. Take it into your conversations, your work, your family, and the way you treat people. The real test of a calm mind is not how peaceful you feel when you sit alone. It is how you behave when someone is difficult, when life is uncertain, and when everything around you becomes noisy. Daniel carried those words with him. He realized that meditation was not supposed to make him disconnected from the world. It was supposed to help him participate in the world with greater awareness. The next morning, he sat in his usual place and began breathing slowly. His thoughts appeared, as always. He thought about his father, his work, his future, and the countless responsibilities waiting for him. But this time, he noticed something different. He was no longer trying to escape his thoughts. He was learning to make room for them without allowing them to control him. He understood that peace was not the absence of noise. Peace was the ability to remain steady while noise existed. This realization changed the way he interacted with people. At work, a new employee joined his team. The young man was nervous and made several mistakes during his first weeks. Some colleagues became impatient and complained about him. Daniel remembered how he had once felt when he was learning something new and afraid of being judged. Instead of criticizing the new employee, Daniel sat with him after work and offered help. He explained the tasks slowly, answered his questions, and told him not to be ashamed of mistakes. You are not supposed to know everything immediately, Daniel said. You are supposed to keep learning. The young man looked relieved. Daniel realized that his own journey had given him something valuable that went beyond personal calm. Because he had learned patience with himself, he could offer patience to others. Because he had learned to listen to his own fears without judgment, he could listen to someone else's fears without making them feel weak. Meditation had expanded his awareness beyond himself. He began noticing how many people around him were silently struggling. The coworker who always looked angry might be exhausted. The friend who stopped answering messages might be overwhelmed. The person who spoke harshly might be carrying pain nobody could see. This did not mean Daniel excused harmful behavior. He still believed in boundaries and responsibility, but he learned that understanding someone's pain could help him respond without immediately adding more anger to the situation. One evening, his sister called. Their father was recovering well, but she was struggling with anxiety about the future. Daniel listened as she explained her worries. In the past, he might have immediately offered solutions. This time, he simply listened. When she finished, he said, I understand why you feel afraid. You do not have to solve everything tonight. His sister became quiet. Then she said, I needed to hear that. Daniel realized that sometimes people do not need advice. They need someone who can remain present with them while they experience something difficult. Meditation had taught him the power of presence. He could not control another person's emotions, but he could offer them a calm space in which those emotions could exist. This was becoming one of the greatest gifts meditation had given him. As Daniel continued practicing, he also discovered that meditation could help him understand the difference between control and acceptance. For years, he had tried to control everything. He wanted to control what people thought of him, how quickly he succeeded, whether plans worked, and whether the future would be safe. But life repeatedly showed him that complete control was impossible. Meditation taught him to focus on what he could control and release what he could not. He could control his effort, but not every result. He could control his response, but not another person's behavior. He could control his preparation, but not every circumstance. He could control where he placed his attention, but not every thought that entered his mind. This understanding reduced a huge amount of unnecessary stress. Daniel began asking a new question whenever he faced difficulty. What is within my control right now? Sometimes the answer was simple. He could take one breath, he could make one phone call, he could apologize, he could study, he could rest, he could ask for help, he could take the next step. Instead of becoming overwhelmed by the entire future, he focused on the next right action. This approach made difficult situations feel manageable. He also learned that meditation was not about becoming passive. Some people misunderstand peace and think it means accepting everything without action. Daniel discovered the opposite. A calm mind could act more effectively because it was not wasting energy on unnecessary panic. When something needed to be changed, he changed it. When a boundary needed to be created, he created it. When an apology was necessary, he gave it. When an opportunity appeared, he pursued it. Meditation did not make him less ambitious. It made his ambition healthier. He no longer wanted success simply to prove that he was better than others. He wanted to build a meaningful life. He wanted to learn. He wanted to help his family. He wanted to become useful. He wanted to grow without losing his peace. This changed his definition of success. Before meditation, Daniel thought success meant reaching a place where nothing could disturb him. Now he understood that real success meant developing the strength to remain grounded even when life changed. He realized that nobody could guarantee a peaceful future. There would always be unexpected problems, difficult conversations, financial worries, health concerns, and moments of disappointment. The goal was not to create a life without storms. The goal was to build a mind that could stand through storms. One afternoon, Daniel was asked to give a presentation to a large group of people. Public speaking had always terrified him. The old fear immediately returned. His mind began predicting embarrassment. What if he forgot his words? What if someone asked a difficult question? What if his voice shook? Instead of allowing those thoughts to grow, Daniel sat quietly before the presentation. He closed his eyes and focused on his breath. He noticed his nervousness. He did not fight it. He simply said, "I am nervous, and I can still do this." Then he stood up and walked into the room. His hands were slightly shaky at first. His voice was not perfect. He made one small mistake and corrected himself. But he continued. As the presentation progressed, he became more comfortable. When he finished, the audience applauded. Daniel felt proud, but the greatest victory was not the applause. It was the realization that he had stopped waiting to feel fearless before taking action. He had learned to act while fear was present. That was courage. Afterward, he thought about the person he had been months earlier. He had once believed that meditation was simply sitting with closed eyes. Now he understood that meditation had become a way of living. It was the pause before reacting. It was the breath before speaking. It was the awareness before making a decision. It was the patience to return after distraction. It was the courage to face uncomfortable emotions without running away. It was the discipline to keep practicing even when progress was invisible. It was the ability to be present with another person instead of constantly being trapped inside his own thoughts. Daniel's journey also changed the way he approached English learning. He began creating a simple daily routine. First, he meditated for 5 minutes. Then he listened to English for 10 minutes. After that, he repeated sentences aloud and practiced speaking for another 10 minutes. Sometimes he made mistakes, but he no longer became frustrated. If his mind wandered, he returned. If he forgot a word, he continued. If he felt embarrassed, he breathed. Slowly, his English improved. But something else improved too. He became more confident in his ability to learn. He realized that confidence did not come from knowing everything. It came from knowing that you could keep learning. This was one of the most important lessons of his entire journey. You do not need to be perfect to move forward. You need to be willing to return. Return to your practice, return to your goals, return to your breath, return to your values, return to yourself. Months later, Daniel visited the old man again. They sat beneath the same tree where everything had begun. Daniel told him about his life, his father's recovery, his work, his English practice, and the presentation he had finally given. The old man listened and smiled. "You have learned the real meaning of meditation," he said. Daniel asked, "What is the real meaning?" The old man looked at him and replied, "To be awake while you are alive." Daniel remained silent. The sentence was simple, but it carried everything he had experienced. To be awake meant to notice the present instead of constantly escaping into the past or future. It meant noticing your thoughts without becoming trapped inside them. It meant recognizing your emotions without allowing them to control your behavior. It meant seeing the people around you instead of treating them as background characters in your own life. It meant noticing the beauty of ordinary moments before they disappeared. Daniel looked at the tree above him. He heard birds in the distance. He felt the wind against his face. For the first time, he realized that he was not waiting for something else to happen. He was simply there, present, alive, peaceful. The old man continued, "Remember, meditation is not measured by how long you can sit with your eyes closed. It is measured by how you live when your eyes are open." Daniel never forgot those words. From that day forward, he continued meditating, but he also carried meditation into everything he did. When he worked with attention. When he listened completely. When he spoke, he tried to speak with kindness. When he became angry, he paused. When he became afraid, he breathed. When he failed, he learned. When he succeeded, he remained grateful. When life became uncertain, he focused on what he could control. And when his mind became noisy, he remembered that he could always return. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson meditation can teach anyone. You do not have to control every thought. You do not have to eliminate every fear. You do not have to create a perfect life. You only need to learn how to meet each moment with awareness. Your mind may wander, bring it back. Your attention may become distracted, bring it back. Your confidence may disappear. Take one breath and begin again. You may feel stressed. Pause. You may feel afraid. Pause. You may feel lost. Pause. In that pause, you may discover something powerful. You still have a choice. You can choose your next thought. You can choose your next action. You can choose whether to react or respond. You can choose whether to run from discomfort or learn from it. You can choose whether to spend your attention on things that drain you or things that build you. This is why meditation is not a boring activity reserved for a special group of people. It is a practical tool for anyone who wants to live with greater awareness. Students can use it before studying. Workers can use it before difficult meetings. Creators can use it when their minds feel overwhelmed. English learners can use it before speaking practice. People who overthink can use it to create space from their thoughts. People who feel stressed can use it to slow down and breathe. People who lack discipline can use it to practice consistency. People who fear failure can use it to learn that fear does not have to control their choices. You do not need to begin with an hour. Begin with 5 minutes. Sit somewhere comfortable. Close your eyes if you want. Breathe naturally. Notice your thoughts. Let them come and go. When your mind wanders, return. Again and again. That is enough. Do not judge yourself because your mind is busy. A busy mind is not a broken mind. You are simply learning to train it. And remember, the moments when your mind wanders are not failures. They are opportunities to practice returning. Every return strengthens your attention. Every breath strengthens your patience. Every pause strengthens your self-control. Every quiet moment strengthens your relationship with yourself. Over time, these small practices can change the way you experience your entire life. You may become calmer during stressful conversations. You may focus longer on important tasks. You may react less quickly when someone upsets you. You may become more patient with yourself and others. You may begin noticing beauty in ordinary moments. You may stop allowing every negative thought to become a permanent belief. And slowly, you may discover that the greatest benefit of meditation is not simply feeling peaceful for a few minutes. It is becoming the kind of person who can carry peace into difficult places. A person who can remain steady when others panic. A person who can listen when others are shouting. A person who can think clearly when emotions are intense. A person who can continue learning when mistakes appear. A person who can face fear without surrendering to it. A person who can experience pain without losing hope. A person who can enjoy success without becoming dependent on it. A person who can live in the present without constantly worrying about the future. That is inner strength, and it begins with something incredibly small. One breath, one pause, one moment of awareness. So, if your mind feels tired today, give it a moment of silence. If you feel stressed, breathe. If you are afraid, notice the fear without allowing it to decide your future. If you are distracted, return to what matters. If you make a mistake, begin again. If you lose your discipline, return to your practice. You do not have to change your entire life tonight. You only need to take the next peaceful step. Maybe that step is 5 minutes of meditation tomorrow morning. Maybe it is putting your phone away while you study. Maybe it is listening carefully to someone you love. Maybe it is pausing before reacting to an angry message. Maybe it is forgiving yourself for a mistake you have carried for too long. Whatever the step is, take it with awareness, because your life is not built only through huge decisions. It is built through thousands of small moments, and in every moment, you have the opportunity to return. Return to your breath, return to your focus, return to your discipline, return to your courage. Return to the present, return to yourself. Daniel once believed that peace would arrive when his problems disappeared. He eventually discovered the truth. Peace does not always come when life becomes quiet. Sometimes peace comes when you learn to become quiet inside, even while life continues making noise. Meditation cannot promise that you will never face difficulty. It cannot promise that you will never feel fear, sadness, anger, or stress. But it can help you meet those experiences with greater awareness. It can help you remember that a thought is not a command, a feeling is not a destiny, and a difficult moment is not the whole story of your life. You are the person who can pause. You are the person who can breathe. You are the person who can choose. And every time you choose awareness over reaction, patience over panic, focus over distraction, and courage over fear, you become stronger. So begin where you are. Sit quietly. Take one slow breath. Notice the world around you. Notice the thoughts inside you. Let them come, let them go, then return. And if you do this consistently, something beautiful may happen. You may discover that the power you were searching for was never somewhere far away. It was quietly waiting inside you, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the endless thoughts. You only needed to become still enough to notice it. And perhaps that is the real power of meditation. It does not create a new person. It reveals the strength that was already there, patiently waiting for you to return to yourself.